Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video I'm lifting the cylinder head of my BMW M51 diesel engine in my Range Rover P38. I am going to replace the cylinder head because it's cracked, but this video is obviously also if you want to just replace the head gasket, or if you're going to replace the timing chains, you have to lift the head up off as well. So this video will serve a lot of people that do work on their BMW M51 engines. Now, if you have a BMW or Opel, then you can skip to this point in the video to skip over all the Range Rover procedure before we can get to the head itself. Okay, so before doing any work inside your engine bay on the P38, it can be a good thing to lift the bonnet to the service mode. So I'll show you first how to do that. So the bonnet is held up with two gas struts and they are connected to the body there and to the bonnet. So you can just loosen the struts by removing this little tab. And then you can lift it out just like that. And then we'll do the same on the other side. Take the strut off and lift the whole bonnet up. And then there are these tabs in the hinge mechanism that you can move about. And then there's a little knob. So you have to push the tab down and then align it to click into place. That will actually hold the bonnet in place. We've already disconnected the battery and now we're going to drain the cooling system. So there's a drain plug underneath the radiator which you can open and then just put a big container underneath it and let the radiator drain out. Then when you disconnect the hoses, there might be some more water leaking out from the engine itself because it also contains coolant. There we go, that's the drain plug. And to help with the draining, you can remove the filler cap to let air through all of the system to make it drain easier. Okay, so now that it's stopped flowing, I just take off the top hoses on the radiator and point them down at the container so that they also can empty as much as possible. We'll take the lower one first. There we go, only a little. And then the top hose. Okay, so in this video I'm actually going to remove the radiator as well as the intercooler and the grille, just to have more space to work and maybe more space to film as well. But if you're just lifting off the cylinder head, then you really do not need to remove the radiator itself, but it does give you more space. Now normally the Range Rover has a fan shroud, so if you want to remove the fan, you also have to take the fan shroud with you up. But I don't have one yet, I will order it. And I usually put the screws back in place, so I don't have to keep track of them somewhere else. Then we have the radiator support bracket. It's mounted with four 13mm bolts. And when those bolts are loosened, you can lift the whole panel off. So we'll just loosen the little clamp and then pry it off carefully, because you don't want to break this plastic on the radiator or this overflow hose. Now that all the pipes are removed from the radiator, we can actually lift it straight up. So let's lift it all. There we go, there it's out. And I'll put the drain plug back in place. Okay, now we can also remove the intercooler. And this is also, you might have some bolts holding it in, but mine doesn't. And I only have to remove this charge pipe on this side and the charge pipe on this side. And they are just held on with some hose clamps. Then we have heaps more workspace with this removed as well. And we don't risk damaging the intercooler or the radiator. And next I'll remove the top hose of the cooling system because it's going to be in the way anyways. And we're just making space for us to work. And while we're at it, we'll just take off the bottom hose as well. Yep. And to keep my workspace clean, I'll put all the parts that I take off into the back of the Range Rover. Okay, we'll remove the air intake pipe first, which goes from the air filter box to the turbo. Now usually there's a hose clamp here, but I don't have one, so I'll just pull that off, and then there's a hose clamp here, which is connected to the elbow that then goes to the turbo. And then we can twist it off. So to remove the intake manifold, we'll just release this pressure sensor. And then there are 12 nuts that you have to remove, and then this whole intake comes off. And to not lose the bottom ones, I usually use an extended magnet. Just like that. Okay, so that's all the nuts of the intake itself. And now there's just this bracket holding it in place. Okay, so now we can just lift off the intake manifold. Oh, and there's a vacuum line as well. So now we'll loosen the wiring harness here that's mounted with 2 bolts. So now it's time to release the tension of the belt. When we push up, it releases the tension of the belt. So then we can remove the belt. There we go. And then release the tensioner again. And then we can remove the bolt that holds the tensioner damper in place. But we don't want to remove this bracket because we're going to need it when we lift the cylinder head off. There we go, and I'll put the bolt back in, just so I know where I have it. So next we have to remove the fuel lines, and down there below you can see that there's the connections to the fuel pump. So we have to remove those, as well as take off nuts at each cylinder. And then we can remove this whole pipe assembly. And the return lines, they can stay. We can lift them off together with the head, but there's one return line to the pressure pump, and that we have to remove either on the pump or on the head. And I'm going to choose to remove it on the head. There's actually a special tool to remove the fuel lines off of the fuel pressure pump, but I don't have that, so I'm separating each line so I can take them off one at a time, because there's no way to get a wrench in between there when everything is mounted. And I'm marking each of these lines with a number that corresponds to the cylinder that they came on. Okay, so now that we have removed all the fuel lines as well as the fuel return line, you can see I've plugged it as good as I could. Now it's time to take off all the glow plug wiring. I'll let the glow plugs stay in place. Let's see, there we go. So there are 6 glow plugs on this engine. We'll remove those as well as the temp sensor wiring. There's a temp sensor and a temp reader basically. And then there's this needle lift sensor, which we also can just disconnect, so we have the wiring loose. Okay, so after removing all the fuel lines and stuff, we go to the other side of the engine, where it's now time to remove the bolts that hold the turbocharger to the exhaust manifold. I've also removed the intake pipe for the air, as well as the pressure pipe for the air from the turbo. I will remove this coolant pipe. This goes from the bottom of the engine around the thermostat housing, and then it goes back into the heater core, as well as connects to the overflow expansion tank. And I'll just open this up and remove the hard line, which goes around the thermostat housing. I will also remove the thermostat housing just to make things easier to reach and stuff. So the coolant pipe, the hard line, is just connected with one bolt to the engine block. And you just pull it out like that. Oh! Okay, and then we'll remove the thermostat housing. And that's just 3 little bolts. And then we have one more coolant line to take off. And that's this one. This goes from the other side of the heater core into the cylinder head. And it's just fitted on here with a simple hose clamp. And finally, before getting into all the timing, we are going to remove this cam sprocket cover. And this also is a timing chain guide pin. There's an O-ring on here that has to be replaced when refitting. So next up, we're going to remove the rocker cover. And the cam cover is held on with 10 bolts. And there we have the timing chain exposed, as well as the whole camshaft. Okay, so now that we are able to see all the cam lobes and their position, it is now time to start locking the timing of the engine. I've got this timing locking pin, and this is supposed to go into the flywheel. So when standing in front of the engine, you go to the right side of the engine. And there you can see the starter motor, and below that, there you can see the timing pin. And I've put it into the hole where it's supposed to go. So when you now turn the engine over, you can try and push the timing pin into place and lock it in. And you'll know you'll be able to do that when the cam lobe of the first piston is at top dead center. And according to the manual, when these two lobes are in a horizontal position, then the cylinder number 1 is at top dead center on the compression stroke. So now we should be able to push the pin into the flywheel and keep it in place there. There we go. Now it's locked into place. To check that it is locked into place at the flywheel, you can just try and turn the engine around. And I can feel it hit on the timing pin. Okay, so now with the flywheel locked, we can put our camshaft locking tool into place. There we go. You can see that it's touching both sides of the cylinder head, and it's clamping the camshaft into place. Then we use this lever tool and get it in here, and this is going to catch on the bolt that's going in here. So we want it to catch on there, and then when we push like that, we loosen the tension on the timing chain tensioner. Okay? And here we have a little timing chain access plug. That plug we have to remove, and it's a 10mm hex. And it was really tight, so I've actually loosened it in advance. Okay, we'll open this. And this is basically also an oil plug. So it has a little copper washer, which you have to remove and replace when refitting it. With that access plug removed, we actually have access to lock the timing chain tensioner in the loose position. So I can push this up and put this pin into place to lock the timing chain tensioner in a loose position. There we go, and now I can release this lever. So with the timing chain tensioner in the loose position, we now have to remove the camshaft sprocket, and it's held on with a bolt. That's the bolt removed. And then we also have to remove the sprocket itself. And now we move slightly lower again, and there we have the timing chain tensioner guide and a timing chain guide bolt. And these can be removed with a Torx 45. There we go. And it's a long guide pin. And same on this side. There we go, that's a different size pin. And then we remove the whole timing chain tensioner rail. Or we drop it down the engine. There we go. So next up, we remove 5 bolts holding the cylinder head to the timing chain cover. There we go. Now we can remove this camshaft holding tool to be able to properly access all the bolts holding the cylinder head to the engine block. Because now it is time to actually start loosening all the head bolts and remove the cylinder head. Since we're using the workshop manual, we are following the exact order of loosening the tension of the bolts. And it's basically a cross pattern. So we'll start with 1, which is the furthest forward and on the left side of the engine from the front. And we'll progressively slacken the bolts, so we don't want to loosen them totally right away. Whew. We get 1 up front, and then 2 is the opposite side. So in the rear and on the right. Number 3 is right across from number 2. And then logically, number 4 is right across from number 1. And number 5 is diagonally across from number 4. And then number 6 is diagonally on the other side, right next to number 2. And then number 7 is straight across from number 6. With number 8 we will have made our second cross pattern. So then number 9 is diagonally across from number 8. And then we'll make the smaller cross pattern and then the 2 in the middle. number 10, and 11, and 12. And then we have 13, and 14. We'll just continue until all the bolts are loose. Okay, it was the right rear bolt that cannot be removed because of the bulkhead. But all the other bolts can be removed. And now we've come to the point when it's time to lift the cylinder head off the engine and out of the engine bay. We've got a hook up front, and then we have to make some sort of lifting eye to go around the rear of the manifold or somewhere so we can lift the head off the engine. So I've now rigged up my engine hoist, and I've put a strap around the exhaust manifold, around the rear, and then I've put the shackle through the lift point and just connected it to my lift. There we have the engine block exposed. Now when you're lifting up the cylinder head, it's important to take care of lifting it straight up, because this plastic does not bend very well, so you have to lift it off straight up. Also, now you can remove the old head gasket and inspect it if you have any suspicion of it leaking. In my case, I don't. In my case, the head is actually cracked, so I'll need to replace that as well. So there we have it, guys. We've got the cylinder head removed, and if you have any questions about any procedure, tools or anything, just comment them down below. Well, I've already put the car back together, so I've also recorded how to put everything back together, and that's going to come in a future video. Thank you for watching. I hope this video helped, and just leave any questions you have below in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see the reinstallation video as well. Thanks for watching.